Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Leonard Marcus, one of the nation's foremost historians and commentators on children's books and storytelling. For decades, Leonard has explored the lives, created processes, and lasting influence of some of the most beloved authors and illustrators in literary history. Through his acclaimed books, exhibitions, interviews, and lectures, he has helped audiences better understand how children's literature shapes imagination, culture, and generations of readers. Most recently, Leonard served as guest curator of Click, Photographers Make Picture Books, a groundbreaking exhibition celebrating the powerful and often overlooked role of photography in children's literature. During the program, we'll explore the enduring power of picture books, the evolution of visual storytelling for children, and what exhibitions like Click reveal about creativity, literacy, and the ways images help us understand the world around us. Let's start by meeting Leonard and hearing all about Click, Photographers Make Picture Books, which will be on display at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art until June 7th. Welcome, Leonard. So delighted to be able to be here.
I'm very happy to be here with you, Jay. Thank you for having me.
And just let me start by first saying congratulations on what's turned out to be a blockbuster of an
Oh,
exhibition.
thank you. Well, these days, everyone, including almost every child, has a camera in their phone or in some other form. So it's a subject that has a very wide appeal, I would say.
Most definitely, most definitely. No, for children through adults alike. What inspired you to focus on photography and picture books?
I think there was more than one reason. One, I was just drawn to it from the time I was about 6 years old. My favorite first children's book was a golden book that was illustrated with photographs. It was
Mm.
about a brother and a sister who had a pet dog, which I desperately wanted to have too, but couldn't because my mother liked her furniture too much. And so, and so I used to dream, not just dream about the book, but actually dream about the pictures because the photographs were so vivid, of course. And I would put myself into those pictures, and that way I was able to imagine having a dog. So I think without being able to explain it back then, I understood from early on in my life how powerful photographs can be. And ever since, all through my teen years and adult years, I've been collecting children's books about with photographs, paying attention to them, going to art museums where photographs are exhibited, learning about the history, everything to do with photographs. And I write nonfiction, and photographs are really the nonfiction of the visual realm.
Mm,
So it's
well,
all, in my DNA, I guess.
Why do you think photography traditionally has received less attention than illustration in children's
Mhm.
literature?
Well, it's the same is true for photography in general in the art world, going
Mhm.
back to when the camera was invented in the 1820s or 30s, that people have different dates for the exact origin. But critics, when they saw the first photographs, and comparing them to paintings, let's say, said, well, how can there be art coming from a machine? You
Yeah.
push the button and there it is. How is that
Yeah.
art?
Mhm.
Whereas, painters were slaving for years over canvases in art studios. So there was a kind of, I would say, misunderstanding from the beginning about what the nature of photography is. Because even though a machine is involved, it's really the perception, the vision of the person behind the machine who's selecting what's in the
Sure.
image, what next to that place is not in the image, what the lighting is going to be like, and on and on and on. It's
Hmm.
it's the same level of decision making, but just done slightly differently. But
Nice.
it took a long time for people to figure that out, and some people still don't get it. In fact, no book of photographic illustration has ever won the Caldecott Medal, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of judges for the prizes over the years who would not even consider photographically illustrated books for the very reason I just explained. Not sure it's really an art.
Well, I must say, hopefully, exhibitions like yours will push that in
Mhm.
the right
Right,
direction for
right,
a breakthrough book recognized shortly.
right. I mean, in an understated way, that was really part of the reason I wanted to do the show. I
Ah.
wanted to open people's minds up to this possibility.
For those who haven't had the opportunity to visit the exhibition yet, would you please share how it's laid out and
Mhm,
what your intent was as
mhm.
curator?
Sure. Well, it's in a pretty large white art gallery. There are 97 photographic prints on the
Mm,
walls, and there are 25 rare books in showcases. And the books are divided into three sections based on different approaches that photographers have had. And it's really over a whole century. There were photographic books back in the 19 teens and even the late 1800s. Uh,
mm,
Three different ways that photographers have generally approached putting photographs into books for children. One of the ways is the way you might guess right from the start, which is documentary realism, like taking pictures, like scenes of Tibet or the life cycle of a llama. Those might be subjects of a children's book illustrated photographically, sort of about the fact-based world made visual. That's one kind. Another kind is more surprising. Even going back to the 19th century, photographers were playing with making images that don't exist in reality, but are really a kind of theater, either by arranging things on a tabletop like a puppet theater and then photographing
mhm,
that, or out in the world having people dress up in costumes and with backdrops like theatrical sets. That's another possibility. And then sometimes they would even splice together negatives. So they were doing the equivalent of what
mm,
we do now with Photoshop, which of course is
mhm,
yet another way to create what I call photo theater. And then there's a third use of photographs, and that's where the photographer is trying to present an idea or a concept to a very young child, which might be as simple as the alphabet or how to count, counting. So you might have one fish, two dogs, three sleigh bells. And you, by looking at those objects, maybe in combination with the numeral or the word spelled out
mhm.
number, you can learn to count. And the photograph really focuses your attention. So it helps you kind of get into the mindset of the concept that is new to you, but something which will be with you for the rest of your life. So
Mhm.
the show is divided into those three sections, and there are both recent books in each of each type and books that go way back, sometimes 50 or 100 years.
Mhm.
And
What
one of the
kind of
things I wanted people to know is like, this is not just something that, people started doing when they had iPhones. It's been going on pretty much since cameras were invented for children.
what kind of journey do you want visitors, especially children, to
Mhm.
experience in the exhibition?
Well, one of the things that photography is really good at is making you look more closely at things that you thought you were familiar with. So that would be the main thing, to have anyone, young or old, looking at a picture, and just because it's so, powerfully or beautifully composed and created, to think a little more deeply about their everyday world. So that would be the first thing. Yeah. And then also, when you have a photograph in the photo theater vein, where you're seeing something that can't exist in the real world, and yet it's a photograph, so it must exist, because photography has the kind of imprimatur of reality or truthfulness. It puts you in this very interesting position of both believing and not believing what you're seeing. And that I think really opens up the imagination for a child or for anyone.
Mhm. How did artists like Ilya redefine the way animals were portrayed for children?
Mhm. Well, she did it in a way which is not that different from what Jane Goodall did many years later, which
Mm,
is to look at animals as individuals rather than just as representatives of a species. She got to know her subjects so well that she was able to capture a look of awareness in their expression. And that's what's really uncanny about her photographs. She photographed, big cats and other animals in the wild, and also domestic animals, animals in zoos, um, the whole gamut. But that was the through line for her. She had a kind of respect for animals as sentient beings that was rare at the time, and which we now are coming more and more to recognize as the truth about animals.
Moving on to another artist, what role did books like Peter Buckley's play in fostering cross-cultural understanding?
Yeah. Well, Peter Buckley was a swashbuckling traveler, and who had been a soldier in Europe during World War II. He became a friend of Ernest Hemingway. They used to go to bullfights
Ah,
together, and
oh,
his
wow.
first book was about bullfighting. It was an adult sort of coffee table book. But the impact of being a soldier in World War II for him was to come out of it wanting to make the world a more peaceful place. And he thought the people to start with were the children. And he thought the way to reach the children was to make books about the everyday lives of children in cultures all around the world. So children would begin to see each other not as strangers, but as having a lot in common. And the ultimate medium for illustrating a book like that, which he wanted to be so convincing to large numbers of children everywhere, was photography. So he visited various countries and got to know people in villages and towns and sort of zoomed in on their private experience, which was a kind of microcosm of what the culture they belonged to represented. And he did something like 8 or 9 books all told. And we have absolutely wonderful photographs from his book, the first one in the series, 1952, set in Italy. And it's about a little boy named Cesare. That's like Caesar, we would
Mhm.
say, Cesare of Italy, who is the son of a shoemaker. And as we see in one of the photographs, is learning to make shoes himself. So their family tradition is going to continue.
Continuing with another icon in the field, how did Tanner Hoban transform ordinary objects into tools for discovery?
That's a very good way of putting it. I mean, she was the quintessential photographer in the concept book category of photographically illustrated children's books. She started her career 1940s and 50s as a portrait photographer. Actually had some of her photographs in the very famous Family of Man exhibition
Ah,
at the Museum of Modern Art. I think I and probably everyone of my generation had the catalog for that exhibition in our dorm rooms because it's all about how people all around the world have all so much in common. Same theme as the Peter Buckley book, really. Post-war,
mm,
concern for making the world better. And but then she read an article in the New York Times, which was about a teacher at a progressive school in New York City who was asked to look after a group of kids who were maybe pre-teens.
mhm,
And she noticed very quickly that they were very jaded and apathetic, and they didn't really pay attention to the city. They were living in New York City, and it just
mm,
seemed boring to them. So she couldn't, she thought there must be a way to change that, given how much is going on in the city. So she arranged to give them very inexpensive movie cameras, video cameras, and took them on tours, walking tours around the neighborhood. And because they were empowered by this device they had in their hands and told
mm,
they could take images of whatever interested them, they really got into it and they began to see their own world in a new way. Another example of the power of photography. This case, moving pictures, but really not that different from, still photography. So she thought, well, I can do that in picture books for lots of kids.
mm,
And so she began making these what she called concept books, which always focused on something which might seem ridiculously simple for the subject of a book, like the difference between high and low. But she would have a photograph on one side, which was an illustration of something that was high, and like a tree, and then on just opposite it would be something low, like a
mhm,
bench on the ground, and one after another. And after a while, you begin to understand the contrast and get the idea. And the photos were individually really beautiful, and often they were taken in environments that where children would naturally gravitate to anyway, like playgrounds or parks, things like that. So it was all very relatable, and her books were published all over the world.
Definitely, definitely. What role do puzzle-like images, such as those by Walter Wick, play
Hmm.
in developing observation skills, which you
Hmm.
mentioned earlier?
Hmm. Well, I mean, Walter Wick has done, he's like a magician. I mean, he produces these huge images full of tiny little details. They might be plastic toys, they might be nuts and bolts and pins and other little household items, but they're not randomly arranged, anything but, and they're beautifully lit. And they create a kind of almost like an alternate universe that you want to get inside. And the way you can do it is by looking more closely. So kids are magnetized by these pictures. And in his books, there's always a little like a rhyme which challenges you to find certain details within the muchness of everything that's in the image. So there's a hunting and gathering or treasure hunt aspect to it. And kids, especially when they get to be around 5 or 6, they're very into competence. They want to feel that they can accomplish things. And so this kind of image feeds them that natural desire they have to sort of show their oats
Nice.
and do what the poem is asking them to do. Now, Walter told this very funny story about visiting school children, which he does a lot of, with big audiences. And so he asked them, "How do you think I took this picture of all the tiny little toys arrayed against a white background with sort of a glowing
Mhm.
light on everything?" And one of them said, "Oh, well, I think you threw them up in the air and then you snapped the picture at just the right moment." And then another one said, "No, you went into outer space where everything is weightless, and that's how you did it."
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, so these, I mean, neither one was exactly right, but just the fact that they were stimulated to have these really wonderful guesses shows you that the photograph was doing its job.
Well, building on that idea, what makes the photo theater section such a playful and imaginative part of the exhibition?
Mhm. Well, I think it's because we expect reality from photographs. That's sort of the default expectation that everyone has. Like see them in the newspaper, it tells you, what happened in some country or whatever it might be. But in the photo theater, without being able to dismiss that way of looking at photographs, you are nonetheless confronted with something which you know is impossible. Like in one of the books represented in the show, it's called Hand Talk Birthday, and it's actually told in part in American Sign Language. And the main character who is photographed as if she were an actress in a play is a founding member of the American Theater of the Deaf. And it's all about a surprise birthday party. It's a very funny, joyful kind of scenario that the book creates. And at a certain point, she makes a wish, after blowing out the candles in her cake. And first, everyone guesses what she has wished, and they do it in sign language and in words. But then you find out what she wished, which was that she could fly. So then you see her up in the air, and they're saying, "Get down from there; it's dangerous." And of course, nobody can really do that, but in photo theater, you can.
Well, a great example, I think, of photo theater is William Wegman. Why
Oh,
do you think his work has resonated across generations?
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, he's known for a certain kind of dog, Weimaraners, um, and he's lived with them, used them in all kinds of art. Originally, not particularly for children, though it
Yeah.
would seem natural when you have dogs that come across as very appealing characters in a photo that might be something that would be of interest to young people. But in any case, in the book that for children, which is represented in the show, is his retelling of classic fairy tale Cinderella, and the dogs are all dressed up in costumes, and there are these sort of backgrounds of castles and
Mhm.
balls and things, and it's obviously it's like a put on. It's sort of campy and very fake, but also fun in a theatrical sort of spoofy kind of way. And but the thing is, I mean, on the one hand, it's just pure fun. You can see that from the beginning. Cinderella's about this beautiful maiden who falls in love with the prince, and here's this dog with a sort of sad, sad face with dressed up like Cinderella. So immediately, it's kind of completely making fun of the old story. But at the same time, he really loves these dogs and he connects with them. There's a communication. And I think one of there's something very mysterious about the way we relate to the animals that we care about. I mean, any dog or cat owner knows that, and that comes across too. So it's more than one thing is happening, and they're not reactions that we're used to having at the same time. So it again it propels us into a sort of other realm of imagination that is very nourishing, I think, and has more is more about asking questions than getting answers.
Oh, I like your use of nourishing. What a
Yeah,
fabulous
yeah.
sense for
No,
that
I think
type of
that's true.
work.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, so many children's books are just kind of literal at the literal level, and you get what the author intended, and that's it. Whereas in some of these images, you're getting more than that, a
Mhm.
lot more.
How have artists like Nina Cruz and Mo Williams blended photography with
Mhm,
drawing and
mhm,
collage in
mhm.
innovative ways?
Sure. Well, Nina Cruz may have been the first American illustrator of children's books to make photographic images inside her computer by,
Hmm.
cutting and splicing and creating images very similar to what the earlier photographers engaged in photo theater were doing by manipulating objects and then photographing the result, the three-dimensional scene they created one way or another.
Hmm.
So she was using a new technology for what was actually a traditional use of photography for children's books, and in a very delightful way. And I mean, the book that I featured was called The Neighborhood Mother Goose, and she had local children, local to where she lives in Brooklyn, act out in various ways. Some of the nursery rhymes that we all know, like "Hey Diddle Diddle," "The Cat and the Fiddle," which we think of as set in a kind of once upon a time,
Yeah.
imaginary realm. But here it's happening right in the streets of Brooklyn. So that's another kind of disconnect, which is fascinating to contemplate, and in a way, it's sort of an unexpected way, it underlines the fact that these rhymes have a kind of universality or timelessness to them. Because they can even be true in 21st or 20th century Brooklyn. And then
Mo
Oh,
Williams.
yeah. Well, it's funny because he's done three books about a little girl who has a stuffed rabbit that she calls Knuffle Bunny. And each of these books is set at a pivotal moment in the girl's developmental life. The first one is the moment leading up to the moment when she speaks her first word in all of her life. And it's because she has lost her pet rabbit, her toy rabbit, and the moment that she finally gets it back after a lot of struggle to find it, she's so thrilled that she says "Knuffle Bunny," and like so clearly why she has found speech, why she has become a speaking creature,
Mhm.
because of that deep connection she has to her favorite thing. But Mo Willems thought originally that by using photographs as the backdrops for this little girl's um, scenes of her everyday life, also in Brooklyn as it happens, by putting photographs there and then just doing little doodly drawings over it, which would represent the characters, would be the easiest project he ever did as an artist. But then when he started putting the photographs in place as the backgrounds, he realized that nothing was quite perfect. Like there'd be an air conditioner in the building that he had as the backdrop that was
Ah,
in the way. And then he realized that being the case, he would have to learn Photoshop, which he didn't know, which is the program for manipulating photograph,
mm.
which Nina Cruz is such a master of. So suddenly he was thrust into this whole new technology realm that had been hoping to just completely avoid, and turned out to be the hardest project he ever did.
That's great.
But it came
That's
out really
great.
well, and I think those books are really classics of our time. The Knuffle Bunny.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
In addition to the wonderful display of picture books, there's a very engaging section in the exhibition, Everyday Art Project, Picture This.
Hmm.
Can you share a little bit about the intent of that feature?
Oh, well, actually, I wasn't the one who put that together, so I can't really answer that question in any detail. Yeah, but certainly the idea was to get children to to see themselves as participants in what was happening.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's the purpose, to
yeah,
empower
yeah.
them and
That's
to
right. Yeah.
put in the get inspired after
Mhm.
viewing the wonderful books that you've laid out to become a
Yeah,
photographer
that's right.
themselves.
And of course,
Indeed.
they often do have access, maybe even own uh, phones that have cameras. And
Mhm.
the power of those cameras these days is it's much better than the ones the NASA astronauts had 50 years
Yeah.
ago, you know, and so I mean they really there's nothing stopping kids from making images like the ones that are in the show.
What do you hope visitors take away after viewing, seeing Glick?
I want them to realize, as some of the critics in the past have not, that photographically illustrated books have a lot to offer. Young readers, that they open the mind. They don't, people would think that photographs sort of close your mind down because they're so literal minded, you know, but that isn't really what's happening there. It's the opposite of that. So I'd like them to be more open to books of that kind and to explore the pretty large library of books that have been published over the last 100 years for with children in mind, and occasionally give them a prize along the way too.
Nice, nice. Looking back, what surprised you most as you researched the history of photographic picture books?
Well, how early it started, I think, was the first surprise, and I mean, we don't have this in the show, but someone in England in the 1850s did some photographs based on Red Riding Hood. He got a girl,
Ah,
dressed her up, and acted out he had a dog dressed up as a wolf. So the impulse to tell stories photographically that might be suitable for children was there almost from the beginning of photography. And I think that one of the reasons, maybe the main reason that photo theater became such a big aspect of it for the art photographers of the 19th century, in other words, very early on, was that they were trying to show any way they could the art world at large that what they were doing was not just a matter of clicking, a button. It required a lot of preparation, a lot of thought, a sense of composition, all the things we associate with other kinds of art. And then that quickly kind of carried over into the children's book realm.
mhm,
Of
mhm.
course, Lewis Carroll never did children's books with photographs, but he was one of the most significant Victorian photographers, portrait photographer,
Mm.
as a
Oh,
sort of an avocation at the same time that he was writing Alice in Wonderland. It's really a shame he didn't put two and two together
oh,
in
wow,
that
that would have
in that
been
way, even though
incredible.
he was a mathematician.
That's for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. Well, Leonard, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. I want to
yeah.
thank you so much again
Oh,
for taking the time to be here, for informing us about the fabulous exhibition Click on display at the Carle Museum. Many more weeks ahead up until June 7th.
yeah.
Definitely encourage viewers and others to make their way there. And just want to wish you continued success with
Thank
future
you.
endeavors.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this, and thank you for asking such good questions.
Also, want to thank those of you watching for tuning in and hope you'll be able to join us next time.